If you're in people leadership, management, HR, there is one demographic you cannot afford to misunderstand or not connect with, and that is the Millennials, or sometimes called Generation Y. This group of young people born between the early 1980s and the late 1990s are a fascinating bunch of human beings. They bring with them some great stuff into the workplace. They are innovative, they're agile, they're natural networkers, they are tech savvy, they're the digital natives. But they bring some challenges with them too. They're a generation whose approach to respect can often seem a little bit jarring to older generations. They're very casual in the workplace in a way that sometimes is off-putting to other people who are of an older generation, who are colleagues in a team environment. They're a generation whose approach to work ethic can often seem a little bit different, and they tend to not stick around as long as older generations do. In fact, if you look at the average length of tenure for Generation Y or the Millennials, it's around the 2.6 year mark. So on balance, there can be some challenges, there can be some positives, but the simple reality is this. If you look at most of the current research, Gen Y will be half of the world's working population by the year 2020. And that is why I say you cannot ignore this group. So here's the challenge. As a leader, as a manager, how do you get the best from the young people that you are leading or managing? Now, I've been working in this space for a number of years now. In fact, I first started tracking some of the trends in different generations back in 2004. At that point, the Millennials and Generation Y were an object of fascination or frustration for many employers. Now they are a daily reality. It's not just a topic we're discussing as a theory. This is the daily reality and a necessity for every leader. So here are 7 keys to getting the best from Millennials or Gen Y in your team or in your workplace. The first key is this: if you're a people leader or a manager, you must put relationship before role. For this young group, relationship is everything. They will not be loyal to brands or to teams, but they will be loyal to people. And so the relationship you build is absolutely critical. In many ways, they've typified that old phrase, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And so as a leader, as a boss, what's the relationship you're building with them? Do they know that you care about them, not just as employees, but as people? So the important critical thing here is you've got to be authentic. You've got to be real. You've got to build trust with this group. There must be a sense of transparency and openness. Now, this doesn't mean if you want to be interested in them, you've got to be interested in the same things. And this is the danger. I often see managers who, in an effort to connect with younger staff, try to dress like them and talk like them, listen to the same music as their young staff. And my simple message is, don't bother. They don't want you to be like them. They want you to be yourself. You know, I often refer to people who try to dress like young people and try and be cooler. I refer to them as generational transvestites. They don't want you to do this. Don't try and be like them. Be yourself. Be real, be genuine, be authentic. That is the pathway to trust and to respect with this group. So the first key, put relationship before role. Second key, if you're going to get the best from Millennials or Generation Y, is you must keep them challenged. If you look at all the data across many years now, looking at what is it that Gen Y or Millennials are looking for in a career or in a role, number one most important thing above competitive salary is education, opportunities for growth, for advancement. The danger zone is when this group get bored, when they start to disengage, when they're not feeling that stretch. Now, I understand there's often a frustration or a hesitation in bosses who will say, well, hey, if they're only going to be here for 2.6 years on average, how much training do I really want to invest in them? And I understand that. The old saying, though, is one to bear in mind, that there is only one thing worse than training your staff and having them leave, and that is not training your staff and having them stay. And you need to realize in a mobile workforce, which is what we now all know and experience, you may train staff members and have them leave, but you'll often find too that the staff members you have come into your team have been trained by the person before you, so there's a bit of a swings and roundabout scenario here. The key message is they will stay longer, they will be more engaged, and they'll perform better if you keep them challenged. So training and opportunities for advancement are absolutely critical. Number 3, you need to make flexibility a priority. So if number 1, the first thing that this group are looking for in a job is opportunity for advancement, to be changed and challenged, number 2 is flexibility. I'm talking flexibility in work times, start times, finish times, the structure of work, the location of work. And hey, we've talked about flexibility for years. And yet, to be really honest, we're still not good at doing it. There are workplace cultures that prize and value those who turn up at a certain time and finish at a certain time and colour inside the lines. We want to make sure that you're here and visible, whether you're productive or not, is sort of beside the point. We need to break that culture. And I want to ask, what is the culture you have in your team? Do you speak the language of flexibility, but in subtle and unspoken ways punish those who try to push the envelope and develop flexible work patterns? Number four, fourth key to getting the best from millennials or Generation Y is you need to give regular positive feedback. One of the things I see worldwide in working with leaders trying to manage young staff is a tension point where managers feel like young team members can be a bit high maintenance, always needing to be thanked or praised. This sense that they come into work in the morning and there's almost an expectation that the boss will say, hey, thank you for being here today. We're so grateful you've arrived. And employers that I speak to will say, why do I have to thank them? I pay them to be here. And the reality is you do have to thank them. This is a generation who've been raised in an era we now dub in retrospect the era of self-esteem. They have been told their whole lives, you're special, you're magnificent, you're unique, and so they've become accustomed to receiving extrinsic, external praise and validation. In fact, some research done a few years ago asked millennials how often they wanted praise from their boss. Now, 60% said once a day, 35% said 2 to 3 times a day would be even better, if that's okay. So you may find that jarring and think, well, are you serious? Do they really need that much encouragement and praise? The simple answer is yes. And so you may find that you need to dial it up a bit and give a whole lot more very clear, deliberate, positive feedback to this group because they're looking for it. Number 5, fifth key to getting the best from this group is to embrace their ideas. Smart leaders are beginning to realize this young group coming into the workplace with, bright eyes and having just finished education can be a phenomenal source of innovation because they come in with a fresh perspective, but they also come in with a boldness and a confidence to challenge the status quo. Previous generations would start their careers with almost a sense of timidity and fear. I'll just fly under the radar, learn the ropes, figure my way around, then I'll start to put up my hand once I know how things work. And yet this generation come in and have this boldness to come in and ask, well, why do we do it that way? And again, smart leaders realize that can be a phenomenal opportunity for innovation. And so when this group come in and challenge the process and suggest ideas, how do you respond? Be honest. Do you see that as a threatening thing, as a challenge to your authority, or do you see it as an opportunity to get a different perspective from a younger generation with fresh eyes? And if you leverage this group's perspective, their fresh ideas, their insights, you're going to be amazing innovation it leads to, but also the sense of ownership and empowerment that it'll bring from them. Number 6, you need to be values driven as an organisation. Now, for many years we talked about the fact that Generation Y and Millennials wanted to work for companies whose values matched their own. Back in 2008, there was a study done that found that 86% of millennials would consider leaving an organisation if that organisation's values didn't match their own. And there's a lot of commentary at the time, and to be honest, I sort of agreed with it, that said, well, hey, once the economy gets tough, if there's a recession or a downturn, that's when the millennials will actually say, well, my values are important, but really, is it that important? Is job security somehow more important than that? And to be honest, to an extent, we've seen that to be the case. When that same research study was done 3 years later, in 2011, only 56% of Gen Ys or millennials said they would leave a job if their values didn't match. But just stop on that point. More than half of them would be willing to forego a role that is satisfying in every other way, that has a good pay packet, that is secure and predictable if that company's values don't match their own personal values. And so what are the values of your organisation? Do you live them out? And do you actually have opportunities for this younger generation to express their values and make sure there's a values match? So for this group, that is absolutely critical. Number 7, final key, if you want to get the best from this group, you need to adopt the role of coach. This is a generation who, despite the fact that they can seem very confident and outward going in the sense they've got it all together, they are looking for mentoring. They're looking to learn from the wisdom of older generations if that wisdom is shared in a constructive and a respectful way. Of course, you can't start with a when I was your age routine. But mentoring for this group is critical. They're looking for it. And yet the sad thing is, well over a third of them report that older generations seem disinterested or unwilling to engage with them in the workplace. how do we break that culture? How do you set up an environment where older generations can impart some of that wisdom to young people, and hopefully reverse mentoring then occurs where some of the things younger generations bring will sharpen the older generation as well? Because I guess this is the key message. Every generation has something to offer, particularly this millennial generation who come in with that sense of energy and enthusiasm. Your role as a leader is to harness that energy, harness that enthusiasm, and get the very best from this group.